Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION@CUENDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 29th of May 2024 from the business section. Peace lecture by US Consul General in Scotland scrapped in Israel row. This article is by Martin Williams. A Reflections on Peace lecture fronted by the USA's top government representative in Scotland has been scrapped in the wake of anti-war protesters issuing a warning that they would be picketing and protesting outside the venue, the Herald can reveal. The sold-out event in Fife, due to take place this evening, Wednesday, was fronted by US Consul General in Edinburgh, Jack Hillmeyer, and was to feature his reflections on how the Scottish-American industrialist Andrew Carnegie contributed to ensure lasting peace in Europe, and how it poses lessons for today's world. But the £5 a ticket talk, due to be held at the Dunfermline Carnegie Library and Galleries, has been targeted by anti-war protesters in the wake of the US's support for Israel in the war in Gaza. Picketing is a form of protest in which people congregate, often in an attempt to stop others from going in. It is understood some protesters were expected to get into the event to confront the US official about the country's stand on Gaza. Flyers circulating on behalf of the Fife Stop the War coalition said they were protesting about the lecture from the key Edinburgh-based US government diplomat on how to build peace in the world. The Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign also encouraged supporters to write to the venue in an attempt to stop the event while planning its own demonstration on the day. Messages were sent saying, "It is unacceptable and highly provocative to Scottish public opinion to have a US diplomat deliver a lecture on peace at the Dunfermline Carnegie Library, while that government is arming and facilitating what the International Court of Justice has ruled can plausibly be called a genocide. We won't take lectures on peace from defenders of genocide. The US consul in Scotland is planning to share his reflections on peace in Dunfermline. Please cancel this event and withdraw the invitation immediately." Managers of the library, which celebrated a 140th anniversary of its opening last year, have now told those who were due to attend that it has been cancelled and that tickets would be refunded to those who plan to attend. An email from the venue sent to those due to go said, "Due to unforeseen circumstances, we have had to cancel this event. We are very sorry for the inconvenience and short notice." The Fife Stop the War coalition said that the lecture was cancelled as a result of their planned protest and believed that it was the US consul that had pulled out. "We're very, very pleased," said a spokesman. "We never believed that the people of Dunfermline needed lectures from representatives of the US government." The US government have been amongst the world's worst warmongers, launching many a disastrous war abroad, and they currently are providing diplomatic cover and funding for Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. So we think the fact that the lecture has been cancelled is a massive positive and shows the power of protest and mass movements. We think that it's a demonstration that when people stand together against war, genocide, and imperialism, they can win. We cannot let the US, Israel, and anyone else who stands idly by and watches genocide take place be unchallenged. The First Minister and SNP leader John Swinney has written to Prime Minister and Tory leader Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Keir Starmer, calling on them to immediately recognise the state of Palestine, demanding that they do the right thing. He said that the nationalists would force a binding vote at Westminster after the general election if they failed to do so. It came as SNP MSP John Mason said the International Criminal Court, the ICC, was biased against Israel after it stated it would seek the arrest of senior Hamas leaders and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for alleged war crimes. In an email to show Israel the red card, a group urging politicians to sever sporting links with the country, he said the ICC was not neutral and are biased against Israel. The Herald revealed last week that thousands of protesters are preparing a campaign of disruption at Hampden on Friday in defiance of a decision by the Scottish Football Association to play a match against Israel behind closed doors. Anti-Israel protesters have been trying to find ways to get around the rules over ticketing to infiltrate Hampden as part of the demonstration. They have sent messages to all MPs and MSPs, including the First Minister and the Prime Minister, in the past few days, saying that the match on Friday should not be played along with the return fixture. Spectators have been banned from the match between Scotland women and Israel women, with the SFA saying the decision over the European Championship qualifier was made after its stadium operations team were alerted to the potential for planned disruptions at the Group B2 game. The Dunfermline Carnegie Library originally opened in Dunfermline on August the 29th, 1883, and was the world's first to be funded by Andrew Carnegie. At the time, it was regarded as the most significant local event of the year, and a public holiday was declared. Carnegie went on to fund more than 2,500 other libraries after launching his first in his hometown in August 1883. The library was funded by an £8,000 grant provided by Carnegie, and the rest was raised by taxation through the Public Libraries Scotland Act. His grants went on to help fund the Central Library in Edinburgh, as well as smaller branch libraries, village halls and reading rooms. Mr. Hillmeyer arrived in Edinburgh in August 2021 after serving as Deputy Consul General in Karachi, Pakistan. The father of four previously served at the US mission to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in Brussels as Political and Public Affairs Advisor from 2015 to 2019. He had previously been spokesman for the US Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa, from 2012 to 2015, and served as the Executive Secretary at the US Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, from 2011 to 2012, and at the US Consulate General in Milan, Italy, from 2008 to 2011. From 2005 to 2008, he worked at the State Department headquarters in Washington, D.C., and has also been posted to the U.S. Consulate General in Durban, South Africa, and the U.S. Embassy in Libreville, Gabon. Before joining the Foreign Service, he was a Peace Corps volunteer. The U.S. Embassy said that scheduling decisions regarding the event were made by the hosts at the Dunfermline Carnegie Library and Galleries, and suggested they comment on the affair. Fife Cultural Trust on Fife, which is responsible for the venue, was approached for comment. That article was by Martin Williams. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 29th of May, 2024, from the Voices section. Swinney in U-turn over errant iPad minister. Why now? This article is by Alison Rowett. My girl does not move with the same effortless grace as Paul the World Cup octopus, but her work rate is better than Punxsutawney Phil, the 1 day a year weather forecasting groundhog. What matters is the success rate, 100% so far. That puts her on a par with Sir John Curtis as an election oracle, though he is probably faster on his feet getting to the letterbox and costs less in gravy bones. She is a dog, of course, and she does not like election leaflets. There have been 3 through the door from the Conservatives, the SNP and the Liberal Democrats, all chewed to soggy balls. That is what the dog thinks of the general election so far, and it is hard to argue otherwise. It makes sense that a period of sustained tumult in UK politics should end in the most boring election campaign in memory. Everyone and everything feels fagged out. The campaigns are lacking in original ideas, in energy, in big personalities. This much we knew going in, but it has still been disheartening to watch. Things might be about to change, however. Voters are not engaging so far, and many will leave it to the last few days to pay attention. But something is stirring out there. Here is a theory. You will have heard of shy Tories, the voters what won it for Major in 1992, said they would not vote Conservative this time. Oh dear, no, terrible shower, but they voted Conservative anyway. This time around, those shy Tories will be joined by shy Labour voters, shy SNP voters, shy Liberal Democrat voters, even shy Alba voters, if you can imagine such a thing. They too will tell pollsters and even themselves that this time it will be different, only to vote as they did last time. But what if they don't? What if the shy become bold and do switch their vote, either for tactical reasons or to register a protest, or because they genuinely want a change? The most volatile period in political history could yet result in electoral surprises. Consider this. The one thing that has remained consistent in the polls is that people are hacked off. Not hacked off in the sense of anti-media, though there is that as well. Scunnered is a better word. People are scunnered at politics in general for not delivering what they wanted. For half of Scotland, the age of the scunnered dates from the independence referendum. For others, it will be the EU referendum. The scunnered hear everything that is said about COVID and Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, and they get it. They truly do. They know there is no money left. The debt is rising and growth is weak. But still they feel let down by politics and politicians. They believe that someone can do better, or at least should be given a chance to try. It is your basic electoral contract laid bare. So, bold voters, the ones who say they will switch and follow through, the parties who have most to lose are those in power at the moment. It is often said, because it is true, oppositions do not win elections, governments lose them. The Tories under Rishi Sunak are losing this one by turning out to be as hopeless as everyone expected, even their own MPs. A call for national service in the first week. There is an example of drowning, not waving, if ever I saw one. Here, the SNP-led Scottish Government is not standing for election. but the party's Westminster wing is desperate to keep third place in the Commons. At the other end of the expectation spectrum, the party will take anything that is not a wipeout. Both governing parties need their campaigns to hold the line. At the very least, don't make matters worse. On present form, the Conservatives have no chance. Voters will deny them a vote in public and in private. There is no event on the horizon, no autumn statement or string of interest rates cuts that is going to shift the dial substantially one way or the other. The SNP, under its new leader John Swinney, is facing such an event today, courtesy of one of its own, Michael Matheson, former Health Secretary, now forever the iPad Minister. The SNP is not going to add to its votes on the back of the Matheson scandal, but it certainly faces losing them. To recap, Mr. Matheson's sons used his official iPad to watch football while on a family holiday abroad. A bill of £11,000 resulted. The MSP claimed this on expenses, saying he had been doing constituency work. He eventually admitted what had happened and repaid the money. In the course of his actions, he misled the Parliament, the media, and the country as a whole. It is such a clear case of wrongdoing that Mr. Swinney's defence of his friend and colleague and his attacks on the process were almost comical. Except I don't know anyone who is laughing. Even among SNP supporters, it is beyond a joke. This one is personal, you see. In claiming for that iPad bill, Mr. Matheson was taking money from you and me. He was taking the proverbial. If he had been an employee anywhere else, he would have been out the door before the day's end. Mr. Swinney has heard all this. He now appears to accept that there should be some sanction. But why change tack now? All he has done is to ensure the matter hangs over the SNP like a rain cloud till election day. However, unlike Rishi Sunak, Mr. Swinney won't personally suffer a soaking. He is not standing for re-election, not yet anyway. But others are, and it is they who will have to defend this foolishness on the doorstep. Mr. Swinney continues to act like the sedentary heckler he promised to leave behind on becoming First Minister. What is he thinking? Whatever it is, voters won't be shy in delivering their verdict on this strange business. That article was by Alison Rowett.
This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 30th of May 2024 from the news section. All hail Andy Murray. We will not see his like again. This article is written by Carlos Alba. It was a kind of searing, humid summer's day, when lifelong memories are forged, when the sights, sounds, and the pulsating sensations were the building blocks of an unforgettable experience. At the centre of it all was an expert craftsman, cementing the structure together with careful, studied determination and furious endeavour. Andy Murray's explosively cathartic final victory at Wimbledon in 2013, making him the first British man to win the tournament in almost 80 years, and the first in the Open era, will live long in the thoughts and sentiments of any Scot who witnessed it. As Djokovic's return hit the net in the final, match-winning point, the image of Murray dropping his racket and removing his cap, pumping the air with both fists, roaring into the sky with his face contorted with unrepressed joy, remains one of the great sporting moments. While greatness may be subjective, and moments of greatness all about context, for me at least, Murray's win ranks with Muhammad Ali coming off the ropes to pummel George Foreman in 1974, Diego Maradona's second goal against England in the 1986 World Cup, and Sam Torrance winning the Ryder Cup for Europe in 1985. All were occasions when, as a spectator, all you could do was to sink back in your chair, catch your breath, and listen to the sound of your heart beating. If that was all Murray had done, he would still have achieved the status of a sporting legend in these parts. But he did more, so much more. He would win other Grand Slams, dozens of other tournaments, 2 Olympic gold medals. He would single-handedly power Great Britain to its first Davis Cup win in 79 years and become the world's #1 tennis player in, arguably, its most competitive ever era. Perhaps his greatest victory was his last, an indoor title in Antwerp in 2019, because he achieved it while playing with a metal hip, following major surgery and 2 years of gruelling recovery. This is likely to be Murray's last season as a professional tennis player, and his final appearance at Wimbledon in a few weeks' time will provide scenes of emotional outpouring unlikely to be repeated in this or any other sport in this country. It will be an opportunity to celebrate not only the successes of one of our most talented and determined athletes, but also to recognise the impeccable way he has gone about his work over the years. In an age of the influencer, overpaid, entitled, image over substance young people who believe their value to society is simply to exist, Murray stands as a beacon of endeavour, fortitude and single-mindedness. Tennis is perhaps the most demanding of sports on players' physical, emotional and psychological resources. To get to the top, they need to be technically gifted and athletically to be at the peak of their potential. But to stay there demands reserves of superhuman will, industry and strength of character. The top professionals are highly paid, and they have the reward of being feted when they win. What Murray sets apart, in my mind, is that he has continued to put himself through the arduous, physically and mentally punishing regimen of being an elite athlete, year after year, long after he ceased to be competitive at the highest level, purely for the love of the sport. In a country where we celebrate the flawed genius of naturally gifted underachievers, again Murray stands apart as a world beater who reached the top because he wanted so much to get there, more so than because he could. With the exception of Sir Chris Hoy and Liz McColgan, it's difficult to think of another Scottish sporting figure who consistently achieved global success through hard work and commitment. From the earliest age, Murray exhibited a rare sense of purpose, leaving home in Dunblane and the comfort of friends and family to live in Barcelona, so that he could attend an elite tennis academy where he rubbed shoulders with contemporaries like Djokovic and Nadal, who would become lifelong adversaries. His decision to leave home was all the more remarkable because he had been a pupil at Dunblane Primary School on the day of the 1996 shooting, when 16 of his schoolmates and a teacher were killed by gunman Thomas Hamilton, a tragedy that continues to haunt him. As a young professional, untutored in public relations and in dealing with the media, he was criticised for a perceived sullenness and lured into elephant traps, like joking that he would be supporting anyone but England at the 2006 World Cup, which turned him into a hate figure among many fans at Wimbledon. His transformation into an articulate and self-assured media performer was done solely through a reliance on his own resources and an innate intelligence, rather than on highly paid professionals. Throughout his career, he has remained resolutely his own person, supported by his parents and his wife Kim, and he astutely turned those who were against him in his favour on his own terms and through his sporting brilliance. He quickly learned that the best place to do his talking was on the tennis court, and within a few short years he went from pariah to darling at the centre court. He didn't need a PR advisor to become known as a staunch advocate of equal rights for female tennis players and women in general. He did so simply by saying what he thought, even correcting journalists on some occasions for their unconscious bias. After he was knighted in the 2015 Queen's New Honours List, he remained resolutely his own person. Typically, he felt a bit uncomfortable receiving the honour and said that he didn't like to be called Sir Andy. In match reports and media coverage, he still insists on being referred to as Murray. In a country where we have to look hard for all our sporting heroes, it's doubtful we will see Murray's like again. While it may be a few years since he was at his majestic best, his retirement later this year will be a time of sadness for people like me, whose lives have been so enriched by his achievements. Wimbledon next month will be especially poignant, as it has been the scene of some of the finest performances. Irrespective of how far into the tournament he goes, we should be thankful for the opportunity to stop what we're doing momentarily, to reflect on his achievements, and to thank him for the memories. That article was written by Carlos Alba. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 30th of May 2024 from the news section. Bin strikes could return as workers balloted on action. This article is written by Gabriel Mackay. Rubbish could once again pile up in Scotland's towns and cities as waste workers are consulted on industrial action. In 2022, a pay dispute between refuse workers belonging to the Unison, Unite and GMB trade unions saw bins go uncollected in 20 of the country's 32 council areas. Public Health Scotland issued a public health warning as rubbish piled up in the streets, with the strikes eventually ended after a 10% pay increase for the lowest paid staff was agreed. Last week, the GMB union rejected an offer from COSLA, the National Association of Scottish Councils, and will now ballot its members on industrial action. The ballot opens on the 5th of June and will end on the 1st of July, meaning walkout and other industrial action could begin on July the 15th. Keir Greenaway, GMB Scotland's senior organiser in public service, said, "Our members have already been forced to wait far too long for an offer that was not close to being acceptable. It is deeply frustrating council workers are once again being driven to industrial action to secure a fair offer, and the blame for that lies squarely with council leaders and ministers. Why has so much time been wasted? Why are council leaders not already in serious discussions with unions and the Scottish Government about how to fund a fair offer? Why on earth should our members in Scotland be asked to accept an offer that is less than being offered to council colleagues in England? The union's members in social care are also voting on industrial action, with the first strike potentially taking place on the 3rd of July, the day before the general election. The results of that vote are expected on the 19th of June, meaning the first possible day of strike action is the 3rd of July, the eve of the general election. Mr. Greenaway said, "This election, like all the others, is all about promises, but council workers have been given too many already. They were promised a minimum wage of £15 an hour by 2026, for example, but this pay offer calls that into serious question. They don't want any more empty promises, they want fair pay." A COSLA spokesperson said, "COSLA wrote to the Scottish Joint Council, SJC, trade unions on Thursday the 23rd of May with a formal pay offer for the SJC local government workforce. This offer is for a settlement which runs for an 18-month period of the 1st of April 2024 to the 30th of September 2025. There would be a 2.2% uplift from the 1st of April, with a further 2% uplift taking effect from the 1st of October. We believe that this is a good offer in the context of inflation and the funding constraints faced by councils. We are disappointed that industrial action is being contemplated by our unions and concerned that it appears to be targeted at the most vulnerable service users. We remain committed to doing the best by our workforce who deliver essential local services in every community across Scotland, and understand our trade unions seeking the best deal possible, but this year's settlement from the Scottish Government means that going any further will mean job losses and service cuts. That article was written by Gabriel Mackay. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 30th of May 2024, from the news section. NHS Scotland backlog hits 840,000 as inpatient wait jumps. This article is written by Josh Carmichael. NHS waiting lists have increased to more than 840,000, figures show, as the number of inpatients waiting for more than a year for treatment jumped by a quarter. Statistics released by Public Health Scotland on the number of people waiting for outpatient, inpatient or day case treatment, or one of the 8 key diagnostic tests, show the figure increased to 840,300 in the quarter up to the end of March. This is an increase of 824,725 at the end of 2023. An increase of 1.8%. Of those waiting, 534,178 were waiting for outpatient treatment, up by 10% from the same point last year, and more than double the size of the list before the pandemic. For inpatient treatment, 156,108 were waiting, a slight decrease from the previous quarter, but up by 5.8% from last year, and more than double the average waiting times in 2019. In July 2022, former Health Secretary Humza Yousaf laid out plans to eradicate long waits for treatment, including ending 2-year waits for inpatient treatment by September of that year, 18-month waits by September 2023, and those over a year by September 2024. The targets have yet to be achieved, the statistical body said, reporting that more than 7,000 people were still waiting more than 2 years, and the number waiting for more than 12 months stood at 37,761, up 24.2% in the past year. Of those waiting, 1,369 have been on the list for more than 3 years. The figures also looked at the 8 key diagnostic tests, including coloscopies, CT scans and MRI scans, showing 150,014 people were still waiting on March the 31st. The figure is 4% higher than the previous quarter, but a decrease of about 2,000 since last year. A spokesman for the Scottish Government said, "We are determined to ensure people receive the treatment they need as soon as possible." Scottish Government investment of £30 million is being targeted at a series of national and local plans to reduce the national backlogs that built up throughout the pandemic. We are working with NHS boards to reduce long waits, including the delivery of the commitments in our £1 billion NHS recovery plan, to support an increase in inpatient, day case and outpatient activity, and the creation of our National Treatment Centres, NTCs programme, which is the single biggest increase in planned care capacity ever created in NHS Scotland. 2 national treatment centres opened last year in Fife and Highland, with 2 further centres opening soon in Forth Valley and the Golden Jubilee, providing additional protected capacity for patients across Scotland. We know that there are still unacceptable waits in some specialities, but we are making progress. Despite the exceptionally challenging winter period, The level of activity for inpatient and day case patients was at its highest since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in the latest quarter, the 9th increase in a row. The number of new outpatient attendances, completed waits, was also at its highest since the beginning of the pandemic, with 324,553 patients seen. But Scottish Tory health spokesman Dr Sandish Gullane said the backlog was out of control. Over 840,000 Scots are still waiting for crucial treatment or diagnostic tests, with many of them being forced to endure unacceptable waits of over a year, he added. Humza Yousaf's flimsy COVID recovery plan and the SNP's dire workforce planning has left my frontline colleagues stretched to the limit and unable to deal with the surge in demand. Rather than obsessing over independence, the SNP should focus their efforts on tackling the crisis that is engulfing our NHS. That article was written by Josh Carmichael. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 30th of May 2024 from the news section. Scottish prisons to release more than 500 early due to crowding. This article is written by Gabriel Mackay. The Scottish Government plans to release more than 500 prisoners early to ease overcrowding, it has announced. The Herald revealed earlier this month that 6 prisons across Scotland were at red status, which was likely to require people to be released early to free up space. The following day, Justice Secretary Angela Constance told MSPs she would be seeking approval to use emergency early release powers. On Wednesday, regulations were laid at the Scottish Parliament which, if agreed, would mean around 550 eligible prisoners will be released in 4 tranches from the end of June 2024 on current modelling. Prisoners who are serving a life sentence and those on the sex offenders register will not be eligible, and exclusions also apply to prisoners subject to non-harassment orders or who have an unspent conviction for domestic abuse. Ms Constance said, "Emergency early release has become necessary to ensure the safety and well-being of Scottish prison service staff and those in their care as a result of the rapid rise in the prison population, creating an unprecedented situation. This rise of around 400 prisoners over the last 2 months is significant and could not have been anticipated, and it cannot be ignored. It is also similar to challenges faced across the UK. Protecting the public remains my number one priority, which is why there are significant and robust safeguards in place. Releases will also be completed in tranches, so the necessary support can be provided to safely resettle released prisoners in their communities." That article was written by Gabriel Mackay.
The Herald, Friday the 31st of May from the news section. Donald Trump found guilty of all 34 charges in hush money trial. Donald Trump has become the first former US president to be convicted of felony crimes, as a New York jury found him guilty of falsifying business records in a scheme to illegally influence the 2016 election through hush money payments to an adult movie actress who said the two had sex. Jurors deliberated for more than 9 hours over 2 days before convicting Trump of all 34 counts he faced. Trump sat stone-faced while the verdict was read, as cheering from the street below could be heard in the hallway on the courthouse's 15th floor, where the decision was revealed. "This was a rigged, disgraceful trial," he told reporters after leaving the courtroom. "The real verdict is going to be November the 5th by the people. They know what happened and everyone knows what happened here." The verdict is a stunning legal reckoning for Trump and exposes him to potential prison time in the city where his manipulations of the tabloid press helped catapult him from a property tycoon to a reality TV star and ultimately president. As he seeks to reclaim the White House in this year's election, the judgment presents voters with another test of their willingness to accept his boundary-breaking behaviour. Trump is expected to quickly appeal against the verdict and will face an awkward dynamic as he returns to the campaign trail as a convicted felon. There are no campaign rallies on the calendar for now, though he is expected to hold fundraisers next week. Judge Joanne Merchan sat sentencing for July the 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where Republican leaders who remained resolute in their support in the immediate aftermath of the verdict are expected to formally make him their nominee. The charges of falsifying business records carry up to 4 years behind bars, though prosecutors have not said whether they intend to seek imprisonment, and it is not clear whether the judge would impose the punishment even if asked. The conviction and even imprisonment will not bar Trump from continuing his pursuit of the White House. Trump faces 3 other felony indictments, but the New York case may be the only one to reach a conclusion before the November election, adding to the significance of the outcome. Though the legal and historical implications of the verdict are apparent, the political consequences are less so, given its potential to reinforce rather than reshape already hardened opinions about Trump. His political career has endured through 2 impeachments, allegations of sexual abuse, investigations into everything from potential ties to Russia to plotting to overturn an election, and personally salacious storylines, including the emergence of a recording in which he boasted about grabbing women's genitals. In addition, the general allegations of the case have been known to voters for years and are widely seen as less grievous than the allegations he faces in 3 other cases that charge him with subverting American democracy and mishandling national security secrets. Even so, the verdict is likely to give President Joe Biden and fellow Democrats space to sharpen arguments that Trump is unfit for office, even as it provides fodder for the presumptive Republican nominee to advance his unsupported claims that he is victimized by a criminal justice system he insists is politically motivated against him. Trump maintained throughout the trial that he had done nothing wrong and that the case should never have been brought, railing against the proceedings from inside the courthouse, where he was joined by a parade of high-profile Republican allies and racking up fines for violating a gag order with inflammatory out-of-court comments about witnesses. Republicans show no sign of loosening their embrace of the party leader, with House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson releasing a statement lamenting what he called a shameful day in American history. He called the case a purely political exercise, not a legal one. The trial involved charges that Trump falsified business records to cover up hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, the actress who said she had sex with the married Trump in 2006. The $130,000 or £100,000 payment was made by Trump's former lawyer and personal fixer Michael Cohen to buy Ms. Daniels' silence during the final weeks of the 2016 race in what prosecutors allege was an effort to interfere in the election. When Cohen was reimbursed, the payments were recorded as legal expenses, which prosecutors said was an unlawful attempt to mask the true purpose of the transaction. Trump's lawyers said they were legitimate payments for legal services. Trump has denied the sexual encounter, and his lawyers argued during the trial that his celebrity status, particularly during the 2016 campaign, made him a target for extortion. They have said hush money deals to bury negative stories about Trump were motivated by personal considerations, such as the impact on his family and brand as a businessman, not political ones. They also sought to undermine the credibility of Cohen, the star prosecution witness who pleaded guilty in 2018 to federal charges related to the payments, as driven by personal animosity towards Trump as well as fame and money. Trump did not give evidence, but jurors heard his voice through a secret recording of a conversation with Cohen in which he and the lawyer discussed a $150,000 hush money deal involving a Playboy model, Karen McDougal, who has said she had an affair with Trump. "What do we got to pay for this one?" $150, Trump was heard saying on the recording made by Cohen. Miss Daniels offered at times a graphic recounting of the sexual encounter she says they had in a hotel suite during a Lake Tahoe golf tournament. The former publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, told the court he worked to keep stories harmful to the Trump campaign from becoming public, including by having his company buy Miss McDougal's story. Jurors also heard from Keith Davison, the lawyer who negotiated the hush money payments on behalf of Miss Daniels and Mr. McDougal. He detailed the tense negotiations to get both women compensated for their silence, but also faced an aggressive round of questioning from a Trump lawyer who noted that Mr. Davidson had helped broker similar hush money deals in cases involving other prominent figures. But the most pivotal witness was Cohen, who spent days on the stand and gave jurors an insider's view of the hush money scheme and what he said was Trump's detailed knowledge of it. "Just take care of it," he quoted Trump as saying at one point. That was an article by Jody Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 31st of May, from the news section. Lamara Bell crash, an inquiry finds police organisational failure. A crashed car lay undiscovered for days, with 2 people inside after an organisation failure in police call handling procedures, a fatal accident inquiry has found. The inquiry also found a police officer who failed to log a call reporting the incident was inadequately trained. Lamara Bell, 25, and John Yule, 28, died after the car they were in left the M9 near Stirling on July 5, 2015, as they drove back from a camping trip. They lay in their Renault Clio for 3 days after being discovered on July 8th, despite police previously being alerted to the incident. Mr. Yule, a father of 5, was pronounced dead at the scene, and Miss Bell, a mother of 2, died 4 days later in hospital. In his determination, published following a fatal accident inquiry, in brackets FAI, into the incident, Sheriff James Williamson said there was no system of reconciling information recorded by officers in notebooks with action taken. He said the failure of Police Scotland to properly risk assess the call handling procedures and have a system of reconciliation was an organisational failure. An organisational failure which led to the safety of the public being compromised and to the events of July 5, 2015. Police Scotland repeated their apology to the families of Mr. Yule and Miss Bell and said that significant improvements have been made to call handling systems since 2015, which are now incomparable to the systems in place at that time. The inquiry heard Mr. Yule suffered unsurvivable injuries in the crash, but Miss Bell would probably have survived if she had received medical treatment on July 5th, albeit with a long-term neurological deficit. In his determination, Sheriff Williamson noted the Bilston Glen Police Call Handling Centre was under pressure that summer amid staffing shortages, and there was confusion among some officers about the tripartite call handling system comprising the Aspire, Avea and Storm systems. Police Sergeant Brian Henry, now retired, volunteered to do overtime at Bilston Glen, arriving into what the sheriff described as a confused, fractious working environment. The inquiry heard that on July 5th, he took a call from farmer John Wilson, reporting a car off the road, and recorded it in his police notebook, but he failed to log it into the storm case management system and no action was taken. Sheriff Williamson found police had not identified the risk that calls might not be dealt with. He said Brian Henry was inadequately trained and left largely unsupervised to operate a system that allowed for human error to go undetected. His human error going undetected meant that Lamara Bell was left in a vehicle by the side of a major motorway in Scotland, suffering devastating injuries. These injuries, together with the delay in rescuing and treating her, led to her death. The crashed car was discovered on July 8, 2015, after another member of the public rang police to report seeing it, and emergency services went to investigate. Sheriff Williamson found the incident was not the result of a one individual failure by Police Scotland, but more than one, and these failures took place over a lengthy period of time, during which the opportunity to resolve them was lost. The FAI came after the family of Miss Bell was awarded more than £1 million in damages from Police Scotland in a civil settlement in December 2021. In September 2021, the force was fined £100,000 at the High Court in Edinburgh after it pleaded guilty to health and safety failings which materially contribute to Miss Bell's death. Sheriff Williamson said Miss Bell's suffering over a period of 3 days, when she was severely injured but conscious, is almost incomprehensible. He said that since the incident in 2015, the Police Contact, Command and Control Division, in brackets C3 Division, has been transformed into an efficient, tightly controlled and sophisticated complex of service centres, all capable of communicating with each other on a unified IT network that is better able to serve and protect the public than in 2015. He said it is not risk-free, it still has a susceptibility to human failure, but the risk of human failure and that failure going undetected is now marginal. Deputy Chief Constable Alan Spears said, Lamara Bell and John Yule's deaths were a tragedy, and my first thoughts today are with their family and friends. Police Scotland failed Lamara and John in 2015, and I repeat the personal apology made previously to their loved ones. We did not keep them safe in their time of need, as was our duty, and for that I am truly sorry. We have fully participated with all inspections, investigations and inquiries established since July 2015 to identify what went wrong and to do everything we possibly can to stop a terrible incident such as this being repeated. Sheriff Williamson's findings highlight the significant improvements which have been made to our call handling systems. How we respond to 999 and 101 calls now is incomparable to how we dealt with them in 2015. None of these provide consolation to Lamara and John's loved ones, but I can give them my assurance that lessons have been learned and that the relentless improvement of service delivery lies at the heart of everything we do. We are studying the determination in detail for any learning which will form part of this continuous improvement. That was an article by Jodie Harrison.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 3rd of June, from the news section. Harassment on trains campaign ahead of Taylor Swift Edinburgh gigs. Report by Mark McDougall. A campaign has been launched in a bid to raise awareness of what constitutes sexual harassment ahead of Taylor Swift's Eras tour in Edinburgh this month. More than 200,000 fans are expected to descend on the Scottish capital, and Crime Stoppers, British Transport Police and Network Rail have joined forces to help make people more aware and provide information on how they can report any harassment directed at them or that they might witness on trains. Government research shows that 84% of women and 60% of men in the UK have experienced sexual harassment, and a Scotland-wide campaign will look to help those affected by it. The campaign will see information distributed at train stations across the country and make it clear that it is unacceptable behaviour. Angela Parker is the National Manager of Crime Stoppers Scotland and hopes it can provide a safer and more enjoyable summer for people using trains, with people able to report anonymously if they feel they don't want to speak publicly on the matter. Taylor Swift will play at Edinburgh Scottish Gas Murrayfield Stadium over 3 nights from June the 7th to June the 9th, with Paramore the support act, and the charity is desperate for people to escape any harassment. She said, "Our charity believes that everyone has a right to feel safe, and that includes when travelling on public transport. We want everyone to have a safe, enjoyable summer, but often sexual harassment can be frightening and traumatising, spoiling what should be a fun and memorable event. That's why we're working with partners to ensure everyone knows what constitutes sexual harassment and how they can report safely and anonymously. Our charity has equipped all of Scotland's railway stations with sexual harassment calling cards and information. If you are uncomfortable about reporting someone you know who is responsible for sexual harassment, remember that you can speak up completely anonymously by calling the railway's sexual harassment line, which is powered by Crime Stoppers on 0800 783 0137. That's 0800 783 0137. We guarantee no one will ever know you contacted us, and you will be helping to protect others from the harm caused by this unacceptable criminal behaviour. People who experience or witness sexual harassment on trains will be able to text 61016 with their concerns, and they will then receive messages back with details of what has been done to tackle the incident, with British Transport Police also potentially meeting people at the next station to take details, if that is what they feel is the best way to solve it. Over the last year, 28% of reported sexual harassment has taken place on public transport, and it's why British Transport Police Chief Inspector Chris Shields is looking to take steps to stop incidents from happening. He said, "Sexual harassment is anything that makes you or anybody else feel uncomfortable with a sexual element. This campaign is about educating people on what is not acceptable and how to report it, so we can work together to make the rail network a hostile environment for sexual harassment. Each report we receive provides us with valuable information which we can use to build an accurate picture of an offender and take action. We need to work together within the community to tackle this behaviour and create this hostile environment to discourage people from behaving in this manner. If you look at the root cause of some behaviours around sexual assault, it all stems from sexual harassment. We urge anyone who experiences or witnesses sexual harassment to text us in 61016 whether something is happening at the time or has happened recently. Save 61016 in your phone so you have the number to hand should you ever need us. No report is too small or trivial, and we will always take you seriously." Network Rail Scotland Community Safety Manager Alan Brooking added, "Any form of sexual harassment is unacceptable on our railway and in wider society. This summer is a busy time for our network, especially with 3 Taylor Swift concerts in Edinburgh. We want everyone to feel safe and confident that they can use the railway without feeling harassed, violated or intimidated. This campaign will contribute to making Scotland's railways safer, ensuring people understand what constitutes sexual harassment and what actions they can take to directly report sexual harassment to Crime Stoppers and partners. We are working closely with Crime Stoppers, British Transport Police and the wider rail industry to demonstrate how we can all play our part in keeping each other safe." And that article was written by Mark McDougall. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 3rd of June, from the news section. Police searching for Mary Malloy on Rum say body found. Report by Jodie Harrison. Police searching for a hill walker who went missing on the Isle of Rum say they have found a body. Mary Malloy, 68, disappeared while on a walk between Trollabal and Bealach and Furchan. I'm sorry, that's written in Gaelic and my Gaelic is not good. So that's Trollabal al Balach and Furchan in the south of the island on the 25th of May. Police Scotland said a woman's body was found on Saturday, but formal identification has still to take place. Ms Malloy's family have been informed. Officers said inquiries were ongoing, but there were no apparent suspicious circumstances. Mountain rescue teams and search dogs were involved in the effort to find Ms Malloy. She had been trying to get back to the Dibble area. And the article was written by Jodie Harrison and read by me, Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 2nd of June, from the news section. Scottish Government quietly axes national recycling target. This article is an exclusive by Kathleen Nutt, political correspondent. Ministers have quietly dropped a nationwide recycling target after repeatedly failing to meet it, the Herald on Sunday can reveal. A strategy document, published by the Scottish Government in 2016, set an ambition for 60% of household waste to be recycled annually by 2020. However, the latest official figures from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, SEPA, show it was never met, and also that the percentage actually got worse over the years since the target was set. In 2016 and 2017, 45% and 46% of household waste was recycled in those years respectively. That fell to 45% in 2018 and 2019. In 2020, only 42% of household waste was recycled, while in 2021 and 2023 the proportion was 43%. The figure for 2023 is due to be published in October. The updated strategic document, published in January this year, setting out a route map on waste and recycling to 2030, did not include a target. There was scope for the Scottish Government to introduce targets in its Circular Economy Bill, due to reach its final parliamentary stage by the summer. Part of the bill says recycling is one of several options for a national target, but no details of the ambition or timescale is given in the legislation. An optional local authority target can be imposed after April 2030. Conservative MSP Maurice Golden put down amendments to the bill to include a 50% household recycling target by 2025 and 60% target by 2027, levels set by the government in 2013 and 2016 respectively, but ministers rejected his proposals. Environmental campaigners last night criticised the Scottish Government for abandoning its 2016 target, which comes after it dropped a key climate change target to reduce carbon emissions by 75% by 2030. Last week, Net Zero Secretary Marie McCallan said those targets were always beyond what was possible. The campaigners described the latest shelving of a green target as unbelievable, given the government worked to bring in the circular economy law specifically designed to tackle waste. They are hoping ministers will think again about scrapping the target and include them in the legislation before it's debated and voted on in its final parliamentary stage this month. It's unbelievable that the Scottish Government is taking a backward step on recycling. Like with our climate targets, ministers have failed to take the action needed to achieve the targets, and now they're trying to wipe their hands of them, said Kim Pratt, Circular Economy campaigner at Friends of the Earth Scotland. The Circular Economy Bill was meant to turn Scotland's failing recycling systems around while building on it to transform our material use, but instead, the Scottish Government has chosen to abandon targets to improve household recycling altogether. Better recycling is the most basic step towards creating a circular economy. Everyone in Scotland deserves access to high quality reuse and recycling services. The Scottish Government has invested £70 million in a recycling improvement fund, and including targets is a key way for the public to know if this investment is having a beneficial impact. She added, the Scottish Government must revive its approach to the Circular Economy Bill if it truly wants to improve how materials and waste are managed. It must include targets to reduce the carbon footprint of Scotland's material use, measures to improve the human rights and environmental impacts in Scotland's international supply chains, as well as mandatory national household recycling targets. Scottish Conservative MSP Maurice Golden said, household recycling targets are a crucial component of any workable circular economy, which is why the Scottish Conservatives push for a renewed commitment to them in the bill. But the SNP Green government opposed them, perhaps because there has been no progress on existing targets for the past decade. Even at this late stage, the SNP must now finally do the right thing and adopt the Conservative proposals on these targets, rather than settling for their usual big talk and failure to deliver. National household recycling rates in Scotland have flatlined for a decade, never rising above 46%. Wales, in contrast, has made steady progress and has raised household recycling to a national average of 65%. Their target of 50% by 2025 is expected to be met. The Circular Economy Bill is a piece of framework legislation which set out the principles for a policy, but leave the detail to be filled in later by ministers. MSPs have complained this type of bill does not have sufficient information to fully scrutinise it, either in terms of its policy proposals or how much they will cost to deliver. Circular Economy Minister Gillian Martin succeeded Lorna Slater last month after Ms Slater was sacked following the collapse of the Boot House Agreement between the Scottish Government and the Greens. Appearing before Holyrood's Net Zero Committee, she turned down Mr Golden's amendments, saying separate work was ongoing to establish new targets, and including targets in the bill would preempt detailed considerations. I understand Mr Golden's intentions with those amendments, but I will set out why I cannot support them, she said. They would preempt the detailed consideration and consultation that will be required before any future statutory national targets are set. She added, setting relevant statutory targets for the circular economy will help to provide a strong focus for action and make clear our intention in terms of policy and ambition. We have set out our intentions in that regard. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, the overall recycling rate in Scotland is at its highest level since records began in 2011, but much has changed since current targets were set in 2010. The climate emergency has intensified our focus on emissions reduction and how we view and treat our resources. Our Circular Economy Bill will establish the framework to give the ministers the powers to introduce statutory targets. Our updated Circular Economy and Waste Route Map consultation sets out our commitment to determine new targets for Scotland from 2025. This approach is based on the Climate Change Committee's own advice to consider separate waste streams and carbon-based metrics when setting future targets. That article was an exclusive by political correspondent Kathleen Nutt. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 2nd of June, from the news section. General election. Swinney considers U-turn on new oil and gas licences. Report by political correspondent Kathleen Nutt. John Swinney is considering dropping Nicola Sturgeon's policy of opposing new oil and gas licences in the North Sea in a bid to retain support for the SNP. The First Minister said an exploration of the policy is underway, amid fears by senior figures this is costing the party support in the north east of Scotland. Ms Sturgeon, who signed the Boot House Agreement to bring the Scottish Greens into government in August 2021, announced a presumption against new developments to help meet climate change targets. The position was largely symbolic as new licences are reserved to Westminster, but it sent a powerful signal to the energy industry. Humza Yousaf also endorsed the stance when he succeeded Ms Sturgeon, but Mr Swinney appears set for a U-turn. Speaking to the Mail on Sunday, Swinney said, I want the Scottish Government to work closely and carefully with the oil and gas sector to ensure its sustainability. We need the oil and gas sector to contribute to the transition to net zero, so it has to be strong enough and robust enough to do that. In addition to that, I want to make sure that the sector is able to contribute to the objectives of energy security that we've set out in our policy programme. It's an exploration of our position, that's how I would describe it. The Scottish Government wants to work with the oil and gas sector to ensure its fiscal sustainability. Senior SNP figures, such as Westminster leader Stephen Flynn, are believed to support a rethink. The future of oil and gas exploration in the North Sea is shaping up to be a key general election in Scotland. Sir Keir Starmer's Labour will honour existing contracts, but not back new licences, a position Mr Flynn claims will cost tens of thousands of jobs. Labour would also increase the windfall tax of energy giant profits, while the SNP is against a rise. Mr Swinney told journalists at the weekend a Labour government would lead to the devastation of employment in the industry in the North Sea. He said, I think the Labour Party has got a real problem in the north east of Scotland because their policy programme will lead to the devastation of employment in the north east of Scotland through the proposals that they are bringing forward, which will have a significant and damaging impact on employment within the oil and gas sector. And what I want to make sure of is that people understand the dangers of Labour's plans and the damage that could be done to employment. And, We've got a commitment to manage to transition to net zero, and that's what the SNP will work with the oil and gas sector to deliver, because we will need the oil and gas sector to contribute to our economy. But we will also ensure that there is the support that the sector can give to enable the transition to renewables to be undertaken. He added, "There's a lot of independent commentary that indicates that the plans of the Labour government, in particular their tax grab that has been perpetuated by the Conservative and Labour parties, is having a real damaging impact on investment in the oil and gas sector, which we need to sustain the sector, but we also need to ensure that the sector can play a part in this transition to net zero, which is fundamental to the approach that we've got to take as a country." Scottish Conservative candidate for West Aberdeenshire and Kirkcaldy, Andrew Bowie, said, "John Swinney must think voters in the North East are buttoned up at the back. The SNP have repeatedly turned their back on the oil and gas sector and the tens of thousands of workers it employs. They refused to back Campbell. They refused to back Rosebank. They went into coalition with the extremist Greens who would shut down the industry overnight. The SNP, like Labour, are no friends of the sector, and this is nothing but a shameless spin from John Swinney. Only the Scottish Conservatives can be trusted to stand up for the oil and gas sector, recognise its importance to Scotland's economy, and its role in achieving net zero ambitions." Ian Murray, Labour's Shadow Scottish Secretary, said, "John Swinney is resorting to increasingly desperate and dishonest attacks on Labour's plans because the SNP has no record to stand on and no ideas of its own." The Scottish Government Draft Energy Plan, published in 2023, included a presumption against new oil and gas drilling licences and a just transition to clean renewable energy in Scotland's efforts to reach net zero. Mark Ruskell, the Scottish Greens climate spokesman, criticised the government over considering abandoning this commitment. "The science is clear. Any shift away from a presumption against new oil and gas exploration would be an act of climate betrayal. It would undermine years of progress we have made in Scotland and send a terrible message to young people and future generations," he said. "There's so much potential in our renewable sectors, and that is where we need our focus to be, not in trying to extract even more oil from our North Sea." When the previous First Minister committed to opposing new developments, it represented a sea change in Scottish politics. He was one of the first oil-rich states saying that enough was enough, and we have to stop new drilling. We need to hold to that commitment not just today, but going forward. Over the last few months, we have seen the SNP trying to face both ways on fossil fuels. It's not good enough. We are in a climate emergency and people deserve clarity about what Scotland is doing to tackle it. Only a vote for the Scottish Greens on July the 4th will help us to take the action that is needed. And that report was by political correspondent Kathleen Nutt, and it was read by me, Ian McKenna.
The Herald on the 4th of June, and the news section. Glasgow to host Royal National Mod in 2026 by Caroline Wilson. Glasgow is to hold the Royal National Mod in 2026 before the baton is passed to Scottish Gaelics Western Isles heartland the following year. Locations for the prestigious 132-year-old celebration of the Gaelic language and culture have been revealed. The annual festival will take place in Glasgow from October 9 to 17, with competitions and performances for all ages held across the week. The city last hosted the mod in 2019, generating more than £3.2 million for the local economy and attracting 12,000 visitors from countries worldwide, including Australia, Canada and the USA. Glasgow has strong links to the language and is home to the world's only Scots Gaelic secondary school. 3 years from now, the festival will return to the Western Isles for the 7th time, taking in venues around Stornoway between October 8 to 16. The festival last held here in 2016, welcoming more than 7,500 visitors. This year's mod will take place in Oban, with the festival due to be held in Lochaber in 2025. Julie Pearson, head of events for Glasgow Live, said the return of the Royal National Mod in 2026 is great news for Glasgow. The city is internationally renowned as an outstanding welcoming destination for events, and the mod held here in 2019 was a resounding success, attracting competitors and audiences from far and wide, and contributing significantly to our economy. Hosting this leading celebration of Gaelic culture reflects our commitment to supporting and promoting creative opportunities for Gaelic. The number of people using Gaelic has increased across Scotland despite a decline in the language heartland, according to the latest census data. Experts say the increase in Gaelic medium education, GME, accounts for this rise. However, Gaelic is now a minority language in the Western Isles. While 52% reported speaking Gaelic in 2011, the figure in 2022 was 45%. Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said Scottish Gaelic was part of a modern, diverse Scotland. And that was by Caroline Wilson. The Herald on the 4th of June and the news section. Industry expert baffled by lack of detail on Labour's GB energy. And that's by Andrew Learmonth. Industry experts are still confused over what exactly Labour's Great British Energy will do. Professor Paul DeLue, the director of Robert Gordon's University's Energy Transition Institute, told the Herald that given the prominence of the proposal, there should be clear plans. He said the party had set up a website but not set out a business model or any funding arrangements or how the organisation would fit in with a number of mechanisms already in place. The leading academic's comments, Carmen Sir Keir Starmer is set to claim that the publicly owned clean energy company will help it to protect the UK from spikes in the price of fuel. The Labour leader is due to meet pensioners on the northwest of England on Tuesday to discuss the proposals. Speaking ahead of the visit, he said, "With Great British Energy, my Change Labour Party will close the door on Putin," Sir Keir said. Energy policy is now a matter for national security. It is a key component of our country's resilience and capacity to weather future shocks. We simply cannot afford to remain as vulnerable to price spikes as we have been in the past. Keeping the lights on and heating our homes should not mean leaving our front door open to Russia. There was a confusion over GB Energy last week when Sir Keir told the BBC it would be an investment vehicle, so not an energy company. The party then tried to clear things up, saying that while it would not be an energy retail company, it would generate power in its own right, as well as owning, managing and operating clean power projects alongside private firms. GB Energy will be given £8.3 billion over the next 5 years, funded by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas firms. Labour has said initial investments will focus on wind and solar projects, with new technologies such as floating offshore wind, hydrogen and carbon capture, and storage also eligible for funding. Prof. DeLue said, "I followed the Sir Keir Starmer's speech last week and I'm still puzzled what GB Energy is about." He outlined 5 national missions to get Britain's future back as part of its 2024 election campaign, including GB Energy. However, the announcement lacked any detail about what GB Energy will deliver, by whom and by when. If it is one of the top 5 missions, I certainly expect clear plans, deliverables, business models, funding arrangements, organisational setup, etc., he added. Prof. DeLue said he was also not clear about the promise to invest in new technologies such as floating offshore wind, hydrogen and carbon capture and storage. "It's already happening through other mechanisms," he said, pointing to the Energy Systems Catapult, Contract for Differences, Net Zero Technology Centres, and other funding models. Is this replacing these, or are these additional activities and funding pots? The Labour plan will likely come under scrutiny in Holyrood tomorrow, with the Tories holding a debate on the energy sector. Speaking aloud of the debate, Douglas Ross said it would be economic and environmental lunacy to turn away from oil and gas. He said the entire economy of North East Scotland is on the line at this election because of the reckless plans of Labour and the SNP to turn off the taps in the North Sea. It is economic and environmental lunacy to turn away from oil and gas, as Labour, the SNP, Greens and Lib Dems are intent on doing, because it would see tens of thousands of skilled jobs lost and force us to import more expensive fossil fuels with greater carbon footprint. Shadow Scotland Secretary Ian Murray said it took a brass neck for Mr Ross to lecture anyone on either the economy or the environment. He said the Tories have caused economic turmoil for millions of Scots and ripped up their climate pledges. Our two dysfunctional governments have no plan to protect jobs in the North East, but oil and gas workers are at the heart of Labour's plans. Under Labour's plans, oil and gas will remain part of our energy system for decades to come, and the next generation of energy jobs will come to Scotland. Only Labour has a plan to deliver lower bills, green jobs, energy security, climate leadership, and publicly owned GB Energy company based here in Scotland. SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn said there are three options on the table for voters: a Labour Party who pose an immediate risk to 100,000 jobs, a Tory Party who pose an immediate risk to delivering net zero, or the SNP who put Scotland first by protecting the oil and gas workforce we have today in order to help develop the net zero jobs and economy of tomorrow. We need the economy of the North East to thrive for decades to come, and that only happens if we utilise the skills and wealth of talent within the oil and gas sector to power and develop our huge renewables potential. If we don't get the transition right and bury our heads in the sand like the Tories and the Labour Party, then we will lose out on investment to other countries around the globe. That would be a betrayal of Scotland's energy potential. And that was by Andrew Learmonth. The Herald on the 4th of June and the news section. Lawyers at breaking point begin boycott after talks end, by Kathleen Nutt. Lawyers across Scotland have begun the first working week of industrial action amid pressure on the system, and complaints from the profession is at breaking point. Around 800 criminal defence solicitors have begun boycotting cases prosecuted under the Scottish Government's landmark domestic abuse legislation following a collapse in talks last month with the Scottish Government over legal aid reforms. They're also refusing to act where an accused has no solicitor and cannot represent him or herself, and they will not take part in a virtual custody pilot designed to speed up the justice process. The Scottish Solicitors Bar Association, SSBA, which represents criminal defence solicitors and is behind the action, say if ministers do to respond positively, they will escalate disruption, court business, including withdrawing from a groundbreaking scheme dedicated to prosecuting domestic abuse cases at Glasgow Sheriff Court. The dispute centres around the level paid to criminal defence lawyers through the legal aid system and how rates are reviewed, with the SSBA pushing for an annual review. The last round of industrial action ended when the previous Justice Minister, Ash Regan, agreed to a 10% increase in fees, taking the fixed fee per summary case to £744 from £621 in 2006-07, and also committed to an annual review. However, the SSBA say the 10% rise did not take effect until July 2023, by which case they say it was cancelled out by inflation, while the annual review has still not progressed. All 39 Scotland's sheriff courts are being affected by the action, which comes after talks between SSBA and the Scottish Government over reforms to legal aid broke down. It follows the previous action, which ended in July 2022 by criminal defence lawyers, which was also over legal aid. The new round of disruption could drag on for weeks and is taking place ahead of the general election on July 4. It also comes amidst wider problems in the criminal justice system, with some 500 prisoners serving sentences of under 4 years or who have 180 days or less left to serve to be released early this month to ease overcrowding in the country's jails. Simon Brown, president of SSBA, told the Herald the boycott was in place in every court, and I've not heard of anyone not supporting it. This one doesn't have an immediate impact, as an accused can appear himself and plead not guilty at first appearance, but he cannot conduct his own trial. So we'll start to see an impact in about 6 weeks' time when the first trials start to come around. One of the reasons we picked this particular action is that delay should give the government time to respond. So far, complete radio silence. He added, we are desperately trying to draw the government's attention to the perilous state the criminal defence bar is in. With only one criminal lawyer available for roughly every 4,500 adults in Scotland, the system is at breaking point. The lack of time to prepare means trials are often delayed, inconveniencing both witnesses and the accused. With legal aid rates at about half of where they should be if they had kept pace with inflation, these delays further dilute the fees that these cases attract, leading to more and more criminal lawyers leaving for better paid areas of law. The only reason the system is functioning is because we are working flat out just to keep up. Responding to the SSBA's plan for action, the Law Society of Scotland President Susan Murray said last month, "We understand and fully appreciate the deep frustration that has driven SSBA members to take these steps. Criminal defence is a fundamental part of Scotland's justice system, and the Law Society has long argued for a properly funded justice sector for the Scottish public. That means proper funding for legal aid and the criminal bar in Scotland. Without appropriate funding, it is ultimately the public who will suffer, particularly those who rely on legal aid to access legal representation for criminal and civil matters. This is a long-standing issue that must be capable of being resolved and for which solutions need to be found urgently." Responding to the SSBA's announcement of its planned action, a Scottish Government spokesperson said last month, "We note the Association's announcement and would encourage them to continue to engage with us. We value the role that legal aid providers play in the justice system. Despite challenging financial circumstances, we have maintained resourcing of legal aid. The Legal Aid Fund is demand-led and directly linked to application numbers, with all eligible costs met. An £11 million package that increased fees for legal aid lawyers and supports the court recovery programme was implemented in April 2023. This brings the total addition funding to legal aid providers to £31 million since April 2021. And that was by Kathleen Nutt.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, review, and to tell your friends about our service.